I'd like to welcome everyone to round two of Grow Your Own grants for this grant funding cycle. We're glad you're here. We're glad you're interested, and it'll be similar to the first set of, or the first presentations that we gave to you. There will be some little things that are different in the application in particular this time, with scoring and those types of things. And also know that any questions or whatever that you have as we progress through this, put them in the chat so we can get them copied down. We will continue the frequently asked questions, information that we had from the first grant, just so that everybody has opportunity to see the same grants. If you email Kelly or Keisha or I questions, same thing, we will put them, we will respond to you, but we will put the exact same response on that sheet. And so just so you know that. Grant background on highlights, I think that's part of what I get to do. So the part of the impetus of this came from the legislature a couple of years ago, passed LB 705, which had funds for teacher apprenticeship programs in Nebraska. The other part of the impetus for this is that we applied then for federal SAFE grant funds, which are supplementing those funds as well. Legislative money is every year. SAFE grant funds we have to apply for on an annual basis. I was confused when we started this, as I know several of you were. I thought the first set of funds would expire in 2007, second round would be 2008, etc. But that's not how this works. They all expired in 2027, and so the next two rounds of funding will operate on a little more compressed timeline than the original one did. Also know that as we extend these funds, particularly for the last round, because the state funding expires annually, we will always be drawing from those funds first. So everyone will get state and federal funding, I guess, depending on if you stall long enough to delay to have all the state funds be spent, you might only get federal funds, but most likely you will be getting some of each. Our three pilot programs, I think, are up and running and doing really well. They're at various stages of implementation and various stages of the things that they're doing creatively to make this process work. Remember, the three pilots are Midland, Shadron, and UNL. And so if you have questions as you go through the process and haven't done it before, I think I skipped ahead too far in the slides. Please, reach out to them, because they're a good source of information for all of us having been there and done that. And so, welcome everybody. I'm going to turn the rest of the program over to Ben and Kelly and Keisha, and I'm going to jet out to the literacy meeting. So y'all have a good time, and you guys can pick up any of the things I forgot to say while I started this meeting off today.
Thanks, Jim. Kelly, Keisha, I'll kick it off to you to provide any other opening context before we proceed.
Which slide you're gonna go to? I know Jim kind of jumped us forward.
Yeah. If you just want to chat really briefly about
Sure.
If it's helpful to talk about the mission and how this aligns to the mission and the goals set by the board.
Sure, I'd love to. First of all, I'm Kelly Bear, and after retiring from teaching, after 30+ years, I am proud to serve at the Nebraska Department of Education. And I'm very blessed to be a part of the educator apprenticeship team. That our program specialist is Cole Brady, and Keisha King, sorry, I said that wrong. Our program associate for the educator apprenticeship team is Cole Brady, and to my right is Keisha, to my left is Keisha King, and she is our educator apprenticeship program specialist. And I get to do what I love doing, and that's building partnerships, because partnerships, we know, is one of the main blocks of the foundation of building successful teacher apprenticeship programs. If you read our mission here at NDE, we know that this mission would be impossible. It would not be possible without access to highly effective educators. And we feel like the teacher apprenticeship allows us to be able to put effective educators that are highly trained into the classroom. Dr. Maher was just talking about this today as he addressed some of the employees at the Nebraska Department of Education, and that our state board legislative, one of our priorities is they're committed to reducing by half the number of school staffing vacancies by the year of 2030. And the teacher apprenticeship is a big part of recruiting, and we know, as evidence shows, of the retention of teachers in Nebraska. We want to train them, highly train them here, and have them stay in Nebraska. Jim already highlighted some of the events that exemplifies Nebraska's commitment to expanding teacher registered apprenticeships here in Nebraska. I was gonna see, I think he covered those well. I'm gonna talk a little more about the fact that because of the state legislative funding of $1 million that we get annually, added to that, the SAFE grant fund that we received from the US Department of Labor, it allowed us to have great results in round one of our sub-grants. And the Nebraska Department of Education was able to award $2.8 million to 8 out of the 16 educator preparation programs. These EPPs partnered with over 25 districts, school districts, private schools, and ESUs across Nebraska. These school partners then were able to select from either their school, so they were able to select candidates that would be eligible for this program, and they thought really had a heart for kids. And that translated in the first round to having over 130 projected apprentices. Those apprentices are going to be able to be trained by a mentor teacher, but while being a full-time employee. So they're going to get to earn and be trained, a relevant hands-on training. And they get to finish their coursework to become a certified teacher with no out-of-pocket costs. And that's really the beauty of this program, to be able to earn and to learn at the same time. And after a year or two of being in the program, they will be able to be a certified teacher in a key teacher shortage area. Now, if we zoom in and look at the details of the round one competitive grant opportunity, if we look at those results from the first round, you can see the 8 PPPs listed on the left of the screen. Those districts fostered strong partnerships with the school districts, the ESUs, the private schools on the right. And that led to what you see in the middle, like we said before, over 130 apprenticeships, and they're able to create life-changing stories for those apprentices. And that's really, again, the beauty of this program. And we know that the real winners of all of this are the children that sit in our classrooms every day across Nebraska. And with that, I'd like to introduce Ben Gagne Maynard. He is with the National Center for Grow Your Own. And I just want to say, none of this could be possible without their partnership, their expert advice from having had experience with teacher apprenticeships in the past. And they're still working very hard with many states and partnering with many states to launch this and move this forward in the United States. They've spearheaded technical assistance for us. And of course, he's leading this informational session with us today. So again, thank you, Ben. We really appreciate all that National Center for Grow Your Own does in our partnership.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I appreciate the kind words. Feeling is mutual in terms of really enjoying and appreciating the work that you all do to make this work a reality in Nebraska. I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces on today's call, but for those who don't know who I am, again, Ben Gagne Maynard. I am based in Madison, Wisconsin, but as Kelly mentioned, our organization, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. We work with states and school districts and ed prep providers around the country. So today I'm going to be leading you all through a quick overview of the round 2 Nebraska competitive teacher registered apprenticeship or grow your own competitive grant. Just so you have some context of today's presentation, we're going to focus today's presentation for both school districts, private schools, and ESUs that might be interested in launching a teacher registered apprenticeship program. And this presentation is also geared towards ed prep providers. So the conversation today is really meant to cater to those two audiences. So I'll dive right in. We want to put a premium on answering your questions today. So just a really brief overview of some of the context behind my organization's prior work. So Tennessee Department of Education, I previously worked there for 4 years, along with NCGYO's founder David Donaldson. One of the things that we launched there right around 2020, 2021 was a statewide grow your own grant. And our goal was to allow and create an environment in which candidates in Tennessee could become a teacher for free and get paid to do so. We also wanted to ensure that any graduates completing a grow your own pathway in Tennessee could be dual certified in special ed or ESL, English as a second language. We wanted to increase the length of student teaching experience in the state. We wanted to incorporate teacher diversity into the rubric, have teachers from a variety of backgrounds stepping into the education profession. And then finally, we want to increase access to higher quality EPPs across the state. There are a lot of EPPs in the state of Tennessee, as there are in Nebraska, but just geographically similar to my understanding of Nebraska, some regions of the state are just physically closer to ed prep providers than others. So what this led to, just really briefly, prior to anything referring to teacher registered apprenticeships, there was the Grow Your Own pathway in Tennessee. So 65 districts, 14 ed prep providers, and we were able to award $6.5 million of state and federal dollars to specifically fund no-cost pathways for 670 future educators. Increase the diversity of who was enrolled in an ed prep provider in the state. Higher performing ed prep providers were able to serve more people. And finally, it led to the first U.S. Department of Labor approved application for the Teacher Registered Apprenticeship Program. So the Teacher Registered Apprenticeship model is very new. The occupation to be apprenticeable of teacher was approved in November of 2021. So it's just over 4 years old. It's 3 years old, excuse me. So it took two administrations, two presidential administrations, 4 applications, and then 15 national letters of support. But now available for any state is the ability to register as an apprenticeship the teacher occupation. Nebraska's statewide model, with NDE serving as sponsor, was actually approved in December of 2023. I think I see Kevin Mills on here. North Platte Public Schools was one of the original pilot partners. So it's been amazing to see this work really flourish in the state of Nebraska. So a lot of what I just outlined for Tennessee, hopefully a lot of that rings true for what you're seeing and what you know that your district, region, or ed prep provider either needs or is able to provide in the state of Nebraska. So Nebraska's needs, just really briefly, uh, also some opportunities to create flexible and partnership-driven teacher preparation pathways that both address critical vacancies in the teaching profession and then improve access to high quality, well prepared teachers. We also know that there are a ton of very experienced non certified staff, community members, paraprofessionals, career changers, bus drivers, you name it, that have a heart for students, but currently just don't have an on ramp to become teachers or don't have the financial means to do that while remaining in their current roles. There's an opportunity to bring those people into the profession. There's also a chance to build on the momentum of existing partnerships, not only just relationships you might already have prior to any of the registered apprenticeship and teaching work happening in Nebraska, but also maybe you are an awardee of a round one grow your own grant in Nebraska. Or maybe you're a district, ESU, or private school that's working with one of those ed prep awardees. Let's build on that momentum and continue the growth that we've seen in this model in Nebraska. And then finally, again, there's that opportunity to scale the teacher apprenticeship model throughout the state. So Nebraska is seeking to create that earn and learn pathway where someone can go to school for free while getting paid to do so, serving in a full-time role under the guidance of a mentor teacher, seeking to create flexible entry points based on where someone is at. Maybe there's a school district or a local school or an ESU where there is a large number of folks who have an associate's degree that would love to become a teacher. How do you create partnerships that create a flexible pathway for someone of that background to enter into the profession without having to sacrifice a career within a school? Additionally, how do we make sure that there's increased retention and teacher effectiveness by making sure that the level of preparation is high while keeping flexible entry points there? And then finally, how do you make sure that pathways are sustainably financially viable? Creating low-cost pathways, registering them for apprenticeship, and sustaining those pathways through the dollars that come through registered apprenticeship. So all that to be said, round two builds off of round one that was released late last year. So round two of this competitive grant, just to clarify, similar to round one, it's a competitive grant for in-state approved ed prep providers who must agree to partner with one or more public school districts, ESUs, or private school employers in the state to design and administer a grow your own style teacher registered apprenticeship program. We'll dive into a little bit more of what that looks like on the ground, but that is who this grant is for. Currently slated to award up to $1.5 million in this round of the grant program in increments of $100,000 per cohort proposal. Just so it's very clear, one application is received for an ed prep provider, but similarly to round two, you're able to submit multiple cohort proposals, and those cohorts can look different based on your partners, based on the certification areas, based on the program types. So that's consistent if you're someone that was a part of the round one application. Grants will also prioritize a competitive number of candidate seats, as well as making sure that overall average cost per candidates remain low and competitive relative to others in the state. Ed prep awardees must then agree to cover all costs on behalf of candidates selected by their local employer. And then finally, selected participants will complete the preparation while being employed in a full-time paid paraprofessional, ed assistant, or equivalent role under a mentor teacher in a Nebraska school. So if you're on this call wondering what are some key differences for round two, just to clarify for the sake of today and also to allude to future informational webinars we'll be putting on as soon as February 3rd, today's application walkthrough is more so to answer general questions that you may have and to start those conversations and to specifically inform conversations between local districts, ESUs, and private schools, and ed prep providers. So today we won't be doing a line-by-line walkthrough of the scoring scenarios or scoring rubric, but if you're wondering what some of the key differences are and you're looking for sort of a cheat sheet, here is a key introduction between round two and how it might compare to the round one application. First and foremost, there's a longer application window. We have between this grant opened at the very beginning of January, and there will be until March 18th for an application to be submitted. That gives a longer window for those conversations to occur at the local level, to maybe for ed preps to engage districts, ESUs, or schools that they haven't worked with previously. There's just a longer application window, and we heard the feedback loud and clear that there was a little bit more time needed to make sure that applications could be submitted. Additionally, NDE will be prioritizing EPPs that can offer both a high number of candidate seats and maintaining the lowest average cost per candidate. Essentially, what that looks like is making sure that if you are applying for a grant of a maximum of $100,000, that you're maximizing those funds awarded to have the highest number of candidate seats while maintaining quality and delivering the lowest average cost that you can within your requested award. I'll also point out that EPPs that maximize the requested funds to specifically cover out-of-pocket costs for candidates, in lieu of using some of those funds to maybe cover some admin costs, will be prioritized. Let me be clear, admin costs that might be incurred by an ed prep can be written into your budget, but you should be considering how that then impacts the overall number of seats that you can offer to one or more district, school, or ESU partners. NDE is prioritizing here that we're maximizing the number of candidates who can then become fully certified teachers. So admin costs are allowable, but within the scoring rubric, in this iteration, there's more emphasis placed on EPPs that can use the total of the reward to specifically maximize the out-of-pocket costs covered for candidates. Early childhood education is also a top priority that's listed in this iteration. Early childhood education was not specifically called out. Early childhood inclusive was a priority in round one, but now early childhood education, as well as early childhood inclusive, is listed as a prioritized certification area. So if that is something that you identify as a need within your district, or your EPP recognizes that that's a need of local employers, that's actually the one of the top scored certification areas in this round. Finally, there's more flexibility on a case-by-case basis for post-baccalaureate programs that focus on one full school year of paid on-the-job training. Want to clarify, that's in lieu of the typically required 2,000 hours. So in round one, 2,000 hours was pretty strictly listed as the minimum length that someone would be employed full-time while completing, employed specifically as a paraprofessional while completing their training. In consultation with the USDOL, there's now flexibility on a case-by-case basis to propose a program that would look like one full year of full-time paid on-the-job training. And specifically within the rubric and the application, you would see a little bit more information about what's needed to make sure that you're outlining program parameters and training. But just so it's clear, one full school year of paid on-the-job training, specifically for post-baccalaureate programs, could be allowable, and it's going to be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. Just gives some more flexibility, particularly for districts, ESUs, and schools that trying to problem solve how to make a post-baccalaureate program that could just be one school year work in your local context. So I'll go a couple more slides and then I'll pause for some initial questions. So just to be clear, if you are a district, an ESU, or a private school on this call, thank you so much for joining. This is an application and a grant opportunity that's specifically designed for NDE-approved ed prep providers in the state of Nebraska. That being said, ed prep providers in the state must work with at least one local employer in order to be eligible for award. So if you joined today, it's a great opportunity to hear about this grant, and to then consider reaching out to one or more ed prep providers, outlining your needs, and forming a partnership that can then turn into a grant application or several applications. There is a need for an ed prep provider to just ensure and certify that they are already approved to offer the teaching certificate pathway that they're outlining in their application. The short way to look at that is, if you're applying for this opportunity as an ed prep provider, you must ensure that any application reflects what's already approved by NDE. If you're seeking an additional program, or a program is under review, that would not then be eligible for this application. You have to outline a program that's currently approved by NDE. So if you're wondering the types of pathways that you could be designing either at the EPP level or the district, and ideally in combination between the two, you could offer either program option A, which is a 2-year bachelor's program, ideally for candidates with 60 plus credits or an associate's degree, and they would earn a bachelor's degree, complete their certification and teaching endorsement in a minimum of 2,000 hours over the course of 2 years. Or you could look towards offering a program option B, which is that post-baccalaureate certification, and that could lead to only certification, or it could be certification plus a master's degree. That's specifically for candidates with a bachelor's degree. If you're thinking, hey, I have candidates that might actually meet both of those recruitment pools, great. You can actually work with an ed prep provider to have them submit multiple proposals, or work with more than one ed prep provider who can meet your needs to fulfill either of these pathways. And I'll just reiterate that post-baccalaureate pathways, for those who already have a bachelor's, programs that allow for 1 full school year of full-time work in lieu of 2,000 hours, which typically exceeds a full school year, that is allowable, but it will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis to make sure that it's eligible for apprenticeship with the U.S. Department of Labor. A couple more highlights. Again, just pointing out that ed prep applicants must partner with one or more of the following entities: a public school district, an ESU, or a private school. Multiple proposals can be submitted by the same ed prep provider. And additionally, any of those entities, a school district, an ESU, or a private school, can also work with multiple ed prep providers. So there's possibility for a lot of collaboration here. The thing to know if you're an ed prep provider, as well as if you're one of these entities above, is that you'll have to submit a letter of support from all of your proposed partners, and that letter must be signed by the LEA superintendent or an equivalent administrator in the situation where a private school in particular might not have a named superintendent, but the equivalent administrator within that school would be able to sign in lieu of a superintendent. I'll also just note that if you are thinking about specifically including an early childhood center and you're interested in the early childhood education or early childhood inclusive pathway, that is great. Those are eligible and in fact prioritized pathways. But just to be clear, independent childhood education centers that are not specifically housed within a Nebraska LEA, so that's a district or an ESU, would not be eligible. Specifically, early childhood entities that are housed within an LEA, so a district or an ESU, will be eligible to apply. So independent childhood centers or child care centers are not eligible. If there are more questions about that specifically, we can address that in the coming section of questions. But just wanted to iterate, that's more of a clarification for round 2 that was added as a result of some questions that we got at the local level. So just to go over really quickly the letters of support. If you are a school district, an ESU, or a private school on this call, and you're thinking about partnering with an ed prep provider or multiple ed prep providers, or if you're an EPP that has not gone through this process before, this is the required contents of a letter of support from those local employers. So first and foremost, the LEA or school will need to indicate that they're willing to participate in this program. They need to make sure that they've reviewed all the scope of work and all of the requirements of the grant to make sure that it's very clear what the parameters of a teacher registered apprenticeship in the state of Nebraska must be. The LEA or school must certify that any additional stipends provided to mentor teachers will be the financial responsibility of the LEA, or would not be paid specifically by the EPP using grant funds. Additional stipends to mentors are allowable. They just cannot be paid using grant funds. These grant funds are specifically to make sure that all out-of-pocket costs for your selected future teachers are covered. The LEA or school must certify that they've been involved in determining and approve of all of the pathways and certification areas that are outlined. This is really important. By signing a letter, you're saying, I am working with this ed prep provider. They have listened to me. They know what my needs are. And I am partnering with them to specifically fulfill my needs via the proposed program. And then finally, just noting that you all are at the district or school level are willing to sign an MOU with the Nebraska Department of Education, just further certifying some responsibilities as an employer. And then finally, you'll partner with NDE to go through the process of registering your partnership as a registered teacher apprenticeship in the state of Nebraska. So a couple more differences. I highlighted that there's a new eligible certification area that's specifically highlighted as a priority, which is early childhood education. To be clear, the minimum requirement is that a program offers at least one pathway in one high vacancy teacher shortage area in Nebraska. Those have been identified at the statewide level. If you have questions about the teacher shortage areas, NDE team, I don't know if it's possible to paste a link to those existing areas, but this is really a chance for you all at the local levels, as well as EPPs, to listen, to inform one another, and to make sure that you're proposing a pathway that really meets your local needs. If you're wondering what the specific priorities are in terms of scored areas, special education, early childhood inclusive, English as a second language as a supplemental endorsement to another shortage area, and then finally early childhood education. And again, EdPreps must certify and demonstrate that they've worked really closely with local partners to determine what their pathways look like. Really, again, pathways should be informed by the local needs. The local district or school is selecting candidates, so there's a real investment being made in the future makeup of these teachers. Okay, a couple other things to highlight here. Programs must begin by no later than September 1 of 2025. What that translates to is you should be thinking about recruitment, selection, and the viability of a program starting by no later than fall of 2025. So again, that might inform whether or not you consider at the EPP or local level, whether or not you want to do a bachelor's level program, a post-baccalaureate program, or both. But just know that programs must begin by no later than September 1 of 2025. That should translate as beginning by the start of the fall 2025 semester. That's to make sure that programs can be completed by no later than June 30th of 2027. For post-bac programs, please know that this is not a requirement, but if you are able to offer a pathway at the EPP level that could have candidates earn their certification by no later than June 30th of 2026, additional priority points will be awarded. It's not a requirement, but if that is possible, you should outline that in your proposal. And then again, finally, I wanted to highlight this. EPP applicants that can allow for rolling admissions on a mutually agreed upon timeline should outline those flexibilities in your application. Maybe you're in a place where you already have a viable and already running partnership, and you could get someone enrolled before that September 1 of 2025 date, as soon as the summer. And then additionally, there is another enrollment period that you could have in the fall. That is great. Enrolling admissions allows for that flexibility. So within your application, you should outline that rolling basis enrollment flexibility that at the EPP level you may have, so long as everyone is able to start a program by no later than September 1 of 2025 and complete by June 30th of 2027. So just a visual, if you're a visual learner, program option A, that bachelor's level pathway, what this looks like is recruiting starting as soon as spring of 2025. So that could look like non-certified employees, existing paraprofessionals, career changers. Maybe you live in an area where there is an abundance of former engineers who might have a bachelor's degree, and they might want to become future STEM teachers. Opportunity to, or if it's a career changers for program option A, potentially more likely career changers with an associate's. Great. They would go through a pathway that would allow them to earn a bachelor's degree in a roughly 2-year period. They would occupy a full-time paraprofessional role within a school district. They would simultaneously be an EPP student. And by no later than June 30th of 2027, they would complete a certification and bachelor's degree granting pathway. For option B, the post-bac model, this is where, if you have that abundance of former engineers, former other career changers, existing paraprofessionals with a bachelor's, parents, guardians, other non-certified employees with a bachelor's, this would be the option that you would pursue with an ed prep partner, or an ed prep would pursue with a local LEA partner. But it'd be a 1 to 2 year pathway starting at no later than fall of 2025. Again, that would allow someone to complete their certification and or potentially a master's degree or simply only certification by no later than June 30th of 2027. So those options are both viable. Candidates may not serve as teachers of record during the program. So this means that they have to be employed in a full-time student-facing role, most specifically as a paraprofessional throughout their training. They may not serve as a teacher of record while they're completing the pathway. This is about training folks to become future teachers, not allowing them to be current teachers while completing their coursework. No out-of-pocket costs are allowed for apprentice candidates, so EPPs must agree to use any awarded funds to cover all costs on behalf of candidates. So textbooks, fees, tuition, using awarded dollars. And just so I'm saying, I'm sure there are a lot of questions that might be popping up. Please feel free to add your questions to the chat so we're able to see them and either answer them on a rolling basis or so that we can read them over when we get to the question section in just a second. So as I mentioned, apprentice candidates will be serving in full-time paraprofessional positions during the duration of their program. There will be a minimum clinical internship experience, residency style student teaching pathway of minimum 1 year. That ensures that candidates have that really prolonged on-ramp to make sure that they have at least 1 school year to work full-time under a mentor, to gain some experience, to have that gradual release so that they're really truly prepared. And making sure that they're ready as day one teachers. Beyond just day one, we like to say that you're preparing folks that they're more than day one ready, effectively not serving as a first year teacher because they're ready to go. They've had that year under their belt with that gradual release model. Wraparound supports should be included. So that means making sure that candidates are not just enrolled, but well supported, both at the district level and the ed prep level. This is very important to make sure that a lot of these folks who might be participating in your programs haven't been to college in 20 years, potentially. It's really important to make sure that wraparound supports are provided so they have the academic, financial, and social emotional supports to be successful. And then finally, just agreeing to pursue registered apprenticeship, which will happen in close partnership with NDE. So let me pause. A lot of information. I'm sure a lot of questions, both from someone who might have applied for round 1 or been involved in round 1, or maybe from districts, schools, ESUs, or EPPs that have not applied for this opportunity in the past. So we'll open it up to questions. Feel free to chime in the chat or to come off mute to address your questions to the NDE. What questions do folks have?
Hi, Ben. It's Sarah from UNL. I just have a question with the application being due in March. When will we know? Because if we're supposed to be recruiting also in the spring, we're not going to recruit until we know we have the money. So curious about that timeline.
Sure. I pardon the skipping forward. I'm just getting to our timeline, so that's transparent. Andy, if you want to go over kind of the currently projected timeline, I'll defer to you all to kind of outline this, but so I'll go on mute, but Kelly and team, if you want to highlight a little what I'm showing here.
Sure, Ben. According to our timeline that we've set out, we're, as you can see, planning on having applications due March 14th. We're hoping to be able to get out notice to those EPPs that will be awarded the funding, hoping to get that, review those applications and get that turned back around by March 21st. And with a proposed contract date on in April and on the 18th.
Yeah, hopefully that's helpful, Sarah. As you can see, the goal is to really make sure and fully recognizing that there can be a short turnaround between recruitment that would occur in the spring and making sure that candidates are ready to go in the fall semester. So this is the currently projected timeline, seeking to make sure that proposed contract awards can be out there as quickly as possible to prioritize those last weeks and months of the school year for official recruitment, screening, and enrollment in by no later than September 1 of 2025. Thanks for the question. Other questions, I'm going to go back to our question slide, but other questions from the group.
I'll ask a question. It doesn't have to do, I've been looking at this, I could probably recite this grant backwards to you at this point. But I do have a question about additional funding, because you did allude to a couple of times that there's going to be a third round. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I'm going to assume that that would then no longer qualify EPPs who are offering track A, which is the bachelor's option, from offering that, because the timeline is going to be very, very compressed. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, Kelly and NDE team, I'll defer to you all to answer, and I'm happy to chime in if helpful afterwards.
That one.
Like, okay,
Oh, sorry, I'm
kick
back.
this over to Jim.
I'll chime into this one. So, yeah, Cammy, you're right in that most likely it would exclude anyone from going on the bachelor's track or working to get your bachelor's track. But there's also a chance that there is a candidate who would fit that and be far enough along to be able to be done in a year. And so I don't ever like to say absolutely not. But I'm gonna say you're probably pretty close to right. It will probably just be the faster track, but I don't close doors.
Yep.
Jim?
So if you got one that's gonna fit that, write one for them, you know?
So can I piggyback onto Cammy's question a little bit? So
So
that was a poor way of going to anyway, Jim. So round 3 comes and goes. What can you see into the future? Because if this is really a great thing and people are investing time and resources, both EPPs, school districts, and we're making movement, have we thought about what happens next, or are we just done? We did this for 3.5 years and then it's just done and we're on to the next.
Kelly and Keisha said they didn't want to work anymore after 3.5 years, so we'll probably just gonna let go. No, I'm just kidding. So I think Jessica is in the process of writing SAFE 3 or whatever it would be.
Yep.
To be able to continue federal funds on this. The legislative funds will continue to be there. And we're really hopeful that we will be able to provide. Jessica, she writes stuff, but that's gonna be a little too soon. But certainly the legislature with some information to tell them that this is a good thing and it's turning out quality teachers and it's allowing teachers who wouldn't otherwise be able to get into the profession to get started, and they're really good and be able to continue that stream of funding that way. And worst comes to worst, we go to the state board and ask them for more money to help us fund this too while we continue to build it. I mean, my crystal ball is no better than yours, but that's what we hope for.
Jim, I'll just add to that from a broad perspective. I won't get out and say we can never guarantee we being NCGYO, or I won't speak for NDE, but what we've seen at a national level is this notion of the field of dreams, right? If you build it, they will come. And part of the idea about building these partnerships is one, getting costs to a place where they're going to be financially sustainable. But then two, the teacher registered apprenticeship model is the fastest growing apprenticeship model, I believe, in the history of apprenticeships. There's a ton of momentum behind this. And there continues to be federal investments, state investments in apprenticeships. So without providing any guarantees, I will just say that there continues to be federal sources, grant dollars, WIOA dollars that continue to be devoted to teacher apprenticeships and just apprenticeships in general. So the idea is in the future, again, building proof points that can continue to open up. And that's part of the impetus behind registering for apprenticeship. There's a lot more dollars that then can potentially be secured as a result of doing so.
I
Thanks,
was
Ben.
wondering about the feedback loop and evaluation, just wondering about the future of being able to share experiences and lessons learned and opportunities for us as a state to grow together in this area. So I know I just was thinking, is there a platform that's planned in the future to be able to collaborate on like one mission, one vision?
So Kelly, we haven't really gone past the start monthly COBs, stuff for that yet, as far as the sharing of information. I don't, we're just gonna let that, I don't know that we have a plan beyond that right now. Seeing how that works out, I think will dictate what our next steps are gonna look like. So what did you have in mind?
Well, I asked just because of the number of districts that we work on a number of projects. And so, you know, seeing the list of schools and the funding and not wanting to put the figuring it out on the districts and really wanting to respect those partnerships. If we have districts that are beautifully working with 4 EPPs, but if every process looks different and every coordination looks different, we're just thinking of on the side of the districts. And as this continues, like what kind of feedback there is from other programs, other states on where does that evaluation or feedback, where does that come back to where we're not putting our districts in situations where they are working with multiple of us, but then we're all doing things differently.
I think that's something that we have to work on.
Yeah.
No, not any big plans down that line yet, but man, I'm sure from your perspective, there's something you need to add.
Yeah, if it's helpful, like tying it to both the round 1 and the round 2 grant specifically. So one of the requirements, and partly it's just the round 1 grantees are in many cases just starting their semesters, right? There's new candidates that will be enrolled or are enrolled as soon as this semester. So one of the requirements of round 1 that's consistent with round 2 is a reporting requirement on a semesterly basis to collect information on who candidates are, how they're progressing through a program. And then there's also a final evaluation requirement where information is collected from ed prep providers about not only progress, but also overall reflections and satisfaction from the district level. And some of that information will be collected on a rolling basis in those semesterly reports, that those are a requirement or receiving funding. So part of it is just more and more information will be coming via those reports, via the community practices that Jim mentioned. The other thing I'll say that is unique in round 1, if you were an awardee for round 2, and this is just true if you're a round 1 awardee, but within round 2, there is a specific mandatory requirement of providing some reflections and lessons learned as part of your response. So round 2 will actually have a specific question for any ed prep providers awarded in round 1 that asks questions to show a level of critical thinking, a level of reflection of any lessons you've initially learned. And I think it's just a really great opportunity to, one, show that as an ed prep provider with your districts, you're growing and learning, but also for the state to collect information on what's working, what's not, what the challenges and successes have been thus far. So it's a great question. I just wanted to highlight those things in the grant specifically.
And Kelly, I take your point about wanting to systematize as much of it as we can, so it's consistent. But then at some point in time, everything diverges into you guys' own unique programs as well.
Yeah.
And so I'm not completely sure how we can make that work, but I get your point.
Could I ask a beginner's question? This is Lorinda from Concordia. May
Yes,
I
ma'am.
ask a beginner's question? So
Yes.
I didn't have opportunity to learn about round 1, so I have basic questions about the actual programs that are prioritized. So what I hear is that this is about bringing new teachers in, and what I'm not understanding is how do the supplemental endorsements of ESL and early childhood, how do they fit in this? Are those for teachers who already have
Yeah.
their certificates, and then it's this program, we could write a grant for ESL or early childhood to be added to an existing endorsement. Certificate, excuse me. Is that right? Or
No.
no?
Those
Okay,
have to be tied to another endorsement that they're earning at the same time.
okay, I see. Okay, very good.
An elementary with an ELL or whatever. It has
Yes.
to be. Yeah,
Okay.
we're not taking currently certificated.
Yes. Okay, that's what I couldn't put those two pieces together. Thank you very much. That answers my question.
I have a question.
Correct.
I guess I probably don't need to actually raise my hand, but, so in the round one funding, and I think it's very similar if I'm looking at the grant application as well. And maybe I'm putting you on the spot here. So if you prefer not to answer, just don't answer yet. But in the round one funding, we wrote for a certain amount of slots for a certain amount of districts in certain high needs areas, right? So for example, 3 SPED, 1 ESL, that's an example. And we're finding with a lot of our districts that some have a lot of need in SPED and a lot of interest in SPED. And the other districts actually on the other side maybe have lower interest and lower need in SPED, said no one ever, but they have higher interest and equal need in EL, for example. And so, you know, you guys have been really good about being more flexible, really flexible as you can be, in ensuring that we're meeting districts' needs and the interest needs so that we can pivot a little. We are not just stuck in 3 slots SPED, 1 slot ESL, or whatever it is. Can we anticipate writing in the same kind of way, but then maybe having flexibility with permission on a case-by-case basis? Like, what's that going to look like?
I don't know, Cammy. I mean, we obviously want to keep the flexibility. But because of the scoring differences in different types of, you know, applications, then we have to be careful when we let people move between. And I would say we'll probably be very similar, but still allow flexibility on the backside. Is I think where we would end up. We're changing a whole bunch of that right now. But if you can keep it in that same scoring category, we'll probably be pretty flexible with you.
Okay.
Because we know if everything's just a plan and the best laid plans of mice and men.
So Cammy, can I ask, because we've had to use a little flexibility, are you talking about like, we had 4 seats here, but we only needed 2, we had 4 seats here, but they only needed 1, so we could move these over here, moving the seats around? Are you talking, okay.
So yeah, that too flexibilities. There's some districts we're not able to fill their amount of slots, right? Because they're small districts and we're learning and doing our best bet. Then there's bigger districts who are saying, I've got a wait list. I really could use some more slots. So that's been helpful to have a flexibility of like, hey, let's work as a team to make sure everyone's needs are getting met, like that slot sharing. But also like, for example, let's say like a Millard says, I have, and I am using the actual example, I have 3 SPED slots and I have 1 EL slot. That is what you have been, that's what the state has given me. But actually what I really need is more EL and then just a couple SPED, let's say. So then we've had flexibilities there too in what we're actually providing for that specific district. So both things.
I think it's unfortunate that anything that we do is going to. We certainly don't want to do anything that's going to hurt the flexibility that you guys are trying to do. We realize that, and hopefully, in my hope anyway, that the second round, people are going to, schools and EPDs both are going to have a better handle on what their needs are, when they're not going to say, oh, we're just kidding, we didn't need 3 SPED people, you know. And so hopefully some of that iron works its way out, and hopefully this round you have more time to work with the schools to get that stuff taken care of ahead of time. Maybe even start to vet some of those candidates beforehand so that the applications are gonna reflect reality more. But we also know that life happens at the same time.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. I just know we're not gonna do anything to take away your flexibility. Ben, you wanna add to that?
No, I appreciate the question. I appreciate I agree with everything that Jim has specified. I think if it's helpful for the context of your application, What I'm showing here is the mechanism by which, and anyone that applied for round one, you'll recognize this. It's the mechanism by which the ed prep provider can specify the different option or proposals you're offering. This would be something that you would use if you're submitting more than one proposal. So again, one application, but many proposals are possible. So just what I'd recommend is getting as specific as possible based on the conversation at the time with the district, right? So prioritizing and hearing from a district what they might need at that given moment, knowing that potentially in the future there might need to be some flexibility as needs, as recruitment changes. But there does need to be a specific endorsement area provided, as well as the number of seats that would be allotted to a given partner within that. So I think it would just be a matter of thinking strategically about how your university or ed prep provider would specifically structure your proposals. And again, you see as an example, LEA here is listed. Maybe an LEA says, I need seats in special education, math, as well as social sciences. There is flexibility to have an LEA listed multiple times based on those needs. So this is meant to be an example, but that's what I would say. There does need to be a specified endorsement area, but you can also, as an LEA listening or as an EPP listening, there can be overlap in where an LEA falls in terms of what certification areas they might be being offered. Any other question? I do want to make sure that I know that we were scheduled to 3. We do, I think, have a little bit more time to go beyond that hour. But any other questions before we move on to the next section, which is really just some more guidance for anyone thinking about applying or being a part of an application. Any other questions? Great. So I will continue us. So if you're wondering as an ed prep provider partner or a prospective applicant, what you're going to be responsible for, first and foremost would be to submit the grant application. So work with your university leadership to identify the number of participants you can serve for that $100,000 grant allotment. And again, you can submit multiple proposals for that maximum of $100,000 per proposal. And then additionally writing the application and submitting it between now and March 18th. Additionally, covering all out-of-pocket costs for candidates using those awarded funds. If you're an awardee, you would then use those funds to cover all tuition, textbooks, fees for candidates selected by the local employer partners. Enrolling those eligible candidates once they're recommended by their employers. Want to reiterate here, those candidates have to meet your minimum admissions requirements. So it's really this partnership between making sure that employers have that final say of who is recommended, but whoever is recommended does need to meet your requirements for admission. So finding that balance in terms of screening, recruitment, and finally enrollment is really crucial. Collaborating with your LEA partners to make sure that candidates are successful, right? You want to build strong partnerships. And I think the folks on this call are already exhibiting a lot of the key functions of a strong partnership. So it's a matter of replicating those in this grant. Partner with NDE to make sure that you're able to register your partnership as a registered apprenticeship. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, data reporting that happens on a continuous basis at least a semesterly basis to let NDE know how candidates are doing and what challenges and opportunities and successes have occurred to date. Okay. The other things I'll highlight are some responsibilities of LEAs. That's a district ESU or a private school that might be looking to partner with an EPP applicant as part of this opportunity. So first and foremost, think about collaborating with your EPP partners to make sure that they're listening to you and based on your local needs. Leverage your ESU connections. So if you're from a small district, listening in here on this call or watching this recording, use this as an opportunity to connect directly with your ESUs, potentially who might have those direct connections with ed prep providers either locally or across the state. I think this is a great opportunity to have partnerships build and develop from very different parts of the state potentially. And I think it's one of the exciting things about this funding opportunity. You're responsible for signing a partner letter of support as part of the grant application process. You are responsible additionally for submitting a proposed wage schedule on which you would pay your proposed teacher apprentices. What that really looks like is saying how much at a minimum would apprentices that you select be paid when they're going through the program in year one. If it's a 2-year program, how much would they be paid in their second year of participation? And then finally, how much would they be making when they become a fully certified teacher? And then finally, working with your EPP partners to complete all other aspects of the application. It's really meant to be a collaborative process. And then finally, I'll highlight here additional responsibilities once an award occurs, collaborating with your EPP partner to make sure that they continue to meet your local needs, signing the partner letters of support as part of the application process, drafting the required wage schedule, identifying and selecting who is going to be participating in the program. I want to emphasize that because this is really about employers saying, I've identified this person. They're truly amazing. We've heard amazing stories from round one of, or the pilot programs of individuals who have been custodians or bus drivers for many, many years at a district. And these types of opportunities have allowed folks to earn a college degree when that would have never been possible. This is about empowering school districts, local schools, and individuals to build these pathways to open up doors and new opportunities for people. So that I think really want to emphasize that part. There's some amazing stories that have come out of these grants already. And then finally, LEAs are responsible for employing teacher apprentices, making sure that they have a mentor teacher when they're going through the program, making sure that you're collaborating with your EPP on who is being selected and in place, and then as well as data collection throughout. And then finally, partnering with NDE to get that program officially registered. I just want to highlight, I'm going to go through these really quickly. Please know that these slides can be publicly shared and they're also within the full application. But if you're wondering what some of the requirements are for wage schedules, the general requirements are included within the grant itself. And then just to share a couple examples. The first example is what a district would outline as potentially their first year and then second year pay. And it's based on their current paraprofessional pay at the district level, something that's already approved by their board. One other example, maybe you're looking to employ some apprentices as an early special education assistant, or maybe additionally as a general ed assistant. You would provide those differentiated pay plans based on whatever's currently approved by your board. And then finally, just some recommendations. If you're watching this as an LEA and you're looking to get some advice about how to engage for ed prep providers, think about leading with emphasizing your local needs, capacity, and what opportunities also exist. Maybe there's a lot of opportunities that you've already identified, and it's a matter of going to ed prep providers, shopping around and really hearing what they're able to offer you in terms of programs that can meet your needs. And then also push for both program quality and a competitive number of seats. For $100,000, looking to learn about ed prep providers in terms of what does their program look like and how many seats can they offer your district, school, or ESU out of that $100,000 award. You can be part of multiple proposals, but finding that balance between program quality and maximizing the number of seats that they can offer. And then finally, exploring multiple options, right? You could look to partner with an EPP that you've had a long-standing relationship with. You could leverage an ESU that might have a connection with ed preps on another part of the state, or you could keep your options open and work with multiple ed prep providers just based on the different programs that they can offer and partnerships that they can present to you. So just keep that in mind. This opens up flexibility to sustain partnerships, or it can open up an initial conversation to work with a completely new EPP partner. So I'll pause there. A lot of information again. Want to see any of the questions before we get to the final section of today. And I know that our numbers have dwindled, but just due to the timing here, but wanted to see if there are any other questions before we move to the final section, which is just timeline and logistics for submission. So any other questions from the field about the last slides I shared? Okay, I'll move us on. Feel free to chime in the chat if you have any additional questions. I'll go through this next section relatively quickly. The thing I really want to highlight is we have two other upcoming pre-bid conferences, February 3rd and February 26th of 2025. If you're an ed prep provider in particular, I would highly recommend attending those and registering. If you go to the currently posted competitive subgrant application, you'll see registration links for those two pre-bid conferences. I wanted to highlight those because those will actually include a much more detailed walkthrough of the scoring rubric. So if you're interested specifically in looking at the mandatory technical requirements and hearing more of a specific walkthrough, as well as some scoring scenarios, please attend those. It's very, very, very helpful. And it's also a chance for you to share more questions. Speaking of questions, if you have questions, please make sure that those are submitted before February 19th of 2025. You'll submit them specifically to nde.teacherapprenticeship@nebraska.gov, and all those questions will be addressed on a rolling basis and responded to by no later than February of 26th of 2025. Those two pre-bid conferences, again, one on the 3rd and one on the 26th of February. The application deadline, I apologize for misspeaking. March 14th is the application deadline. So specifically the March 14th, that is when you must have all application materials submitted to NDE. March 21st is when the planned notice of contract award would be. April 18th is the projected date for a proposed contract beginning. Spring of 2026 through the fall of, spring of 2025 through the fall of 2025 is when recruitment would occur. And then no later than September 1 of 2025 is when programs would need to begin. Apologies for the typo there, just to be very clear. Spring of 2025 through fall of 2025 is when recruitment would occur. Submission guidelines, there's no maximum or minimum page limit. You just need to make sure that you're using consistent formatting along the lines of a 1-inch margin, Times New Roman font, 12-point font. Paper copies are not accepted. You'll specifically need to submit an application via the steps I'll outline in a second. Applicants may submit only one EPP. So if you're an EPP, you can only submit one application, but you can submit multiple proposals for $100,000. So that could look like submitting 5 proposals and if you win all, you would win $500,000. You could submit for up to $1 million for 10 proposals for $100,000 each. You'll follow the specific guidance that's included in what's called Appendix C, in terms of including a summary that differentiates between your different proposals. So proposals can be differentiated by program type, by endorsement or certification area, by LEA partners, some combination of those factors. Cohorts can be made up of more than one LEA or school partner. So you could submit one application of proposal for $100,000 with 5 candidates from LEA A and 5 candidates from LEA B. Or you could submit an proposal rather with one outline of $100,000, 3 seats to LEA A, 3 seats to LEA B, 1 seat to LEA C. I'll show a couple of examples on the next slide. Let me actually go here first. So this is just a sample of what that proposal summary should look like. Highly recommend digging specifically into the grant application to look into what the parameters are for submission. But please know that within your total application, you'll outline the total amount requested. And within each proposal that you'll outline in the summary, you'd specify how many seats you can offer for $100,000, what program option you'll offer, and what endorsement/certification area you'd be offering. So I'll just highlight here, again, this is just more of an outline for how to submit multiple proposals. You should outline throughout as specifically as you can when something pertains to program number 1, program number 2, and that will correspond to what you're offering and outlining within this summary table. So finally, just submission guidelines. All materials will be submitted as one PDF, and you'll submit those to Kelly Bear by no later than March 14th, 2025. Kelly's email is included here, and it's also outlined within the application. It must be submitted by no later than midnight Central Time on March 14th of 2025. All questions need to be submitted by no later than February 19th of 2025. And those can be submitted to that nde.teacherapprenticeship@nebraska.gov. You can submit those on a rolling basis till that deadline. I would highly recommend it if you have a question from a district lens, from a school lens, or at the EPP level. So that concludes the detailed walkthrough. Want to open things up to any other questions from the group. Any other questions from the participants that are on today's call? I'll give it a couple more seconds. Any other questions? Want to make sure that we're a resource and can be helpful. Good. I'm glad it's been helpful, Cami. Thanks for joining. Not hearing any other questions. I just want to, and we had space for additional Q&A. Just want to reiterate the grant timeline and specifically those pre-bid conferences that are coming up on February 3rd and February 26th of 2025. In the grant application, which we can make sure it is shared if you haven't already received it, please make sure that you're registering for those opportunities. It's a really great chance to hear more specifically. We'll dive into a full walkthrough of the application. That looks like line by line, more of an explanation of how the program applications will be scored. So I highly recommend attending. And thank you so much. Contacts again for questions, you can contact nde.teacherapprenticeship@nebraska.gov. For all other questions, you would refer them directly to Kelly. And NDE team, I'll let you all close it out here.
Thanks, everybody, for attending. Please contact us if you have any questions. They look forward to reviewing and scoring your applications.
Awesome.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care, everyone.